Welcome to another Ask a CEO show. I'm Greg Demetrio, your host. My day job is CEO of Lorraine Gregory Communications, which is an integrated marketing and advertising agency here in New York. But my real passion is talking to CEOs about their journey to the corner office and what it's like running their companies today. Today, our guest is Robert Gebbia, and he is a high-impact national executive in the nonprofit space. He's the president and CEO of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which is the leading suicide prevention organization in the United States. He's made a significant difference in the lives of millions. He's grown the top-line revenue of this important nonprofit over 5,500%, from $700,000 to $39 million annually. He developed more than 70 chapters across the country and has set a goal of reducing suicides by 20% by 2025 through innovation, grants, research, public awareness, and education. He's a founding member of the National Council of Suicide Prevention and is the chair of the board of directors of the National Health Council. Mr. Gebbia came to AFSP after his tenure at United Way and his position as public health advisor for the city of New York. Welcome to Ask a CEO, Robert Gebbia, the president and CEO of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So the show, Robert, is about your journey pretty much to the corner office and what it's like running such a large organization today. But before we get started, perhaps you tell the audience a little bit about your backstory, your personal bio, how you wound up arriving at the AFSP.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you, Greg, for having me. And it's been a great journey for me. You know, you make decisions about your career along the way, and coming to AFSP was one of those decisions. I look back now and say that was a great move. And I'll tell you why. I had worked for many years for other nonprofits. I had a great career with the United Way, where I got great training. I worked a lot in giving out grants. I worked a lot in evaluation of, evaluation studies, how we were using the funds. And then as I moved up in the United Way, I got the opportunity to become more strategic, got involved in strategic planning and fundraising. And so I had a great kind of range of skills that I got by working for United Way. But it was time to go. You know, you reach a point and you say, what else is there for me mid-career? And I came upon this, and it was a startup. And it was a risk because it was 10 years old, but it was under $1 million. It was very tiny.
Oh,
it had
my goodness.
No reach.
Oh, I empathize with you. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and how many of them are stuck at that level? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But I thought I could bring something. You know, I thought I could bring something and maybe spend a few years and help them, apply the skills I had. It seemed to be a good fit and probably move on. But I hit it right. You know, it was one of those things. I'm so passionate about this cause. And I really felt like this is a place I can make a difference. And that's how I got here.
Wow. I'll tell you, they're very fortunate to have you and have you move the organization the way you have. So maybe you could tell us about the history of the organization and how it was founded, the mission and the timeline of the really impressive growth. I mean, it's really an impressive story. So maybe you could give us that backstory.
Yeah, sure. So it was started by some families in New York that had lost loved ones to suicide. This is back in the late 1980s. And they teamed up with some researchers out of Columbia University in New York. Who felt there wasn't enough investment in the science, the research and learning how to prevent suicide. And they teamed up and they raised a little bit of money and they started the foundation. And its initial mission was to fund suicide research. And that was more limited. It was a small New York-based foundation funding a few research studies a year. And it kind of stayed that way for about 10 years. And then when they were looking for their first full-time, at that point, executive director, that's when I found them. And they wanted to move it in new directions. And they wanted to broaden the mission, obviously make it more sustainable, and become a more nationwide suicide prevention organization. And that's what enticed me. But, if not for those original pioneers, those families, you think about the late 1980s, people weren't talking about this. And it was very hard for families to say that they lost a loved one. Yeah. And today it's thank goodness a lot better. But in those days, those were real brave people.
And there was not a lot of help for people who were going through
No,
that type of suffering, the ones that were left behind. And it just seems
absolutely.
like today there's such an epidemic of suicides across all segments of the population, but especially in the military veterans and the law enforcement officers. And my history is I'm a retired detective, and I suffered from PTSD. And thank you God, I never went down that rabbit hole of having suicide ideation, but I could see
Mhm.
how easily it happens. So maybe you
Yes.
could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe you
sure.
can help us understand these tragedies.
You think about veterans and how their service to the country and law enforcement and those that are there to protect us, right? But it's a culture, often military as well as law enforcement, and other professions too, that often make it very hard to ask for help. We have to tough it up. And today, out of 1 out of every 5 suicides in the U.S. is among a veteran, and law enforcement has high rates of suicide. Other male-dominated industries as well. Construction has high rates of suicide.
Is that right?
Physicians have a high rate of suicide. But you look at the common denominator, and it's very hard in certain kinds of professions to say, I need help. And we're trying to change that culture and say it's okay. And a lot of our leaders in law enforcement and military and so on are really trying to change the culture to say the brave thing to do is to ask for help. And
But
if we could get people help, we could save their lives.
it's okay to not be okay, right?
Exactly right.
So,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, I've taken a bit of that as my crusade, if you will, my little part to help advance the conversation around PTSD and suicide. And
Yeah.
one of the best things that could happen to me was that I met Larry Sprung, one of your board members, and
Yes.
we've struck it up, and he and I are both in the same vein in terms of what needs to be done and how we can help.
Yeah,
So,
I think things are changing though in the military and veteran
absolutely,
community.
absolutely.
And we actually have a great program that we do with the VA, and we make it available to law enforcement where they can reach out anonymously, confidentially, and get help, and it doesn't end up, affecting their careers and their records, and it's peer-to-peer help, which is important. So there are programs, we offer some, and many others do too,
Yeah.
that are reaching out to the
Well,
veterans and
to
law
go from a
enforcement.
warrior mentality, or even and that crosses both veins, veterans and military and law enforcement. You have
Yeah.
that warrior mentality that you're invincible, and when you come
Yeah.
up and you feel that you're broken, where do you go with that? It's so hard
Yeah,
to
very
make that
hard.
first move that says, "Hey, guess what? Somebody got to help me here because I'm in
Hmm.
trouble." So what you
Yep.
guys are doing is amazing stuff. This programs you have out there, the focus that you have. So now, when you first took the seat, the corner office in the association and in the foundation, what were your initial initiatives? Because you came into this 10-year startup mentality type
Yeah. Hmm.
nonprofit. What were your initial priorities when
So
you sat down?
I actually asked that question, and if anyone's ever being interviewed for a new position, that's a great question to ask. What do you want? In my tenure, what do you want to see happen? And the answer was really clear, which was very, very helpful to me. Make this sustainable. It was 70% funded when I arrived by pharmaceutical grants. It was the heyday of medications for depression. There was a lot of money in the pharma industry, and that helped get the foundation started, but that wasn't sustainable, and you couldn't grow with that. That was limited. So the first thing was sustainability. The second thing, and they're related, was to really become much better known and broader. Make this an organization that people know. We used to hear it all the time. We're not the American Cancer Society. Everybody knows that. Or Heart Association. We want to be known. And how do you do that? It's easy to say you want to be sustainable. It's easy to say you want to be better known, and they help each other, because the better known you are, the more people you reach, the more potential donors you have, the better you can build the revenue. So it took us a while, but we had some strategies. Walks were an enormous game changer for us. Doing those walk events drew people to us. Many of those people became ongoing supporters and volunteers. It started to build a name recognition and a brand. And I think we hit it right, because the issue was starting to become more in the public, discussion. People were more interested in talking about their mental health.
Right.
People who were affected were speaking out in larger numbers. So I think timing helps, to
Yeah.
be honest. But we had some good strategies as well for becoming sustainable and really generating the income we needed to be able to invest in the programming that we do.
So now, when you first took over, was it more of a local or regional type of nonprofit? Because you've overseen
Yeah.
amazing growth and expansion. You went to what, 70 chapters now?
Yes.
So
Yep.
national growth is a heavy lift. Maybe you could tell us how that was accomplished so that you became the preeminent national organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember a conversation with my board, and we had a couple of fledgling chapters. They would kind of come and go. They didn't have any resources, didn't have any staff. They were more like support groups than chapters. And I remember going to the board and saying, either we should forget about that and just be a New York-based organization, a regional organization. But if we're serious about being a national organization, we need to invest in creating a presence all around the country, and chapters are the way to go. And we got good advice from some leading nonprofits that had chapters who were very helpful to us. And that's the other thing. How do you get there? You know what you want to do. How do you get there? Again, the walks helped us organize chapters. The first step was to go into a community and try to get volunteers to work with us in creating a walk. From that walk, we found people who said, I want to do something more. And they became, kind of the organizing group for a chapter in that community. And then you sustain that and you give them the support and the staffing. But chapters really made us nationwide in a way we weren't before. And in that, you have to deliver programs locally, or else there's no value, right? Why would you support something in your community if you didn't see the value of it?
Like a franchise organization, you have the model, but you need to give them the
Right.
tools.
Right. So that's kind of how that got started. And once it caught on, people said, well, I've been on your website. I see there's no chapter in Cincinnati, okay, would you like to be involved in helping to create one? And so that's how it really took off.
Excellent.
And we had tremendous support from some really great volunteers, people who personally had a loss, who had someone in their family who struggled. Maybe they struggled and now are well and wanted to do something. And when you have that kind of passion, if you could channel it with a good business plan and get them involved in buying into that, boy, that's a powerful combination.
Yeah. So, all right, so you're leading this nonprofit in the world, and it calls for vision and execution. All right. So these things, you just don't stumble across them. They don't happen on whimsically, right? How are you able to increase that top line revenue? Now, if I'm correct, it's 5,500% from $700,000 to $39 million annually.
Yeah.
How? And that's a huge increase.
Yeah. And it's, when we were just starting, when I arrived, we were, as I said, 70% pharmaceutical funded. Now we're about 1 or 2% pharmaceutical funded. We get a couple of grants. The idea was to go to the public, and, with online giving and all of the, ways to give now, just expanding, social media campaigns, all kinds of things. We were able to build a really strong base of donors. We have over 1 million donors, and many of them giving us $25, sponsoring a walker, let's say. We also have high-end donors. We have people who give us major gifts. So we run the gamut, but it's all individuals. And increasingly in the last 5 years, more foundations and corporate gifts outside of the pharma industry, corporations, because you know what? They have employees who struggle. They have often lose employees to suicide. And so we tapped into what I believe was a real interest in trying to address this public health problem. And the individuals stepped it up, and that's a sustainable model. Sure. I mean, even if the economy does drop a little, it's not something that we're so reliant on 1 or 2 sources.
I don't think that's something you want to, you don't want to turn a blind eye to such an important cause for such an important epidemic that's running across the country. So I think you have sustainability in terms of maintaining the donor base.
Yes, totally.
And
as long as we show them value, and I'm a stickler on that, and I talk to my team all the time. Never take a donor for granted. Never take contributions for granted. I don't care how big they are, how small they are. We have to show what we're doing We have to keep our overhead costs down.
Right.
We have to really be, effective in what we do and communicate that so they feel, okay, I have confidence in this organization.
My
Our
advice
brand and
to
our reputation are important.
absolutely. My advice to nonprofits always has been you have to run it like a business.
Absolutely.
It may be run out of your heart, but you've got to run it out of your head.
Absolutely.
You got to do all the things that a business would have to do. So like any other business, revenue dictates what can and cannot be undertaken.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make those determinations?
Well, I have a great board. That's first thing. And I think any nonprofit, for those listening who may be, from the nonprofit world, never shy away from recruiting, individuals who one, care about your issue and not just there for, just namesake, but two, who have real savvy business backgrounds. Draw upon that, use that. And I think that's really helped me strategically enormously. And also putting a strong leadership team, staff team together.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two really important things from the CEO's perspective that make it work. Because, you want to have good strategies and you want to implement them, as well. So you need both. You need both the board and you need both the senior team.
Yeah, a good idea is just an idea until you execute it. Right?
Absolutely. And a lot of things, great ideas that fall flat don't happen.
Yeah.
And
so you mentioned a little bit ago about your volunteers. So
Mm-hmm.
Now the way I understand it, you have a rather large network of volunteers. So how do you utilize them and how do you keep them in the fold, so to speak?
That's a great question. And we have somewhere on, in terms of really ongoing volunteers around the country through our chapters, about 10,000 volunteers. And they're in key roles. They may be on committees, walk committees, program committees. They may help peer-to-peer, in terms of the programming, and they raise money for us. The main thing is to keep in touch with them, keep them informed, and don't forget to recognize them. Let them know you value them and give them meaningful roles, and then support them. Volunteer. I always think about that. We should never take them for granted. They don't have to do this. They're not being paid to do this. They're doing this because they're passionate,
right,
and they care. And never forget that. And I think if you can do that, obviously recognize them, obviously, help them in the things you want them to do, give them the support. But I think that's the secret. If you take them for granted and you don't really, appreciate them or show them what you're doing to meet the mission that they care so much about, it's not going to work. They'll go away. They'll find some other place to get involved.
Exactly. They're going to come and go. Their donation to you is their time and their energy. So you have to treat them just like a donor.
Absolutely.
In my mind. So, all right.
And also, we're aggressive about our mission. So, we set a bold goal to try to reduce the suicide rate 20% by 2025. That's an ambitious goal. It was going up for 2 decades. And now in 2019, we saw the first drop, 2% drop in 20 years.
Wow,
and the preliminary data for 2020, even though we're in a pandemic, which has real challenges to people's mental health, we're seeing a 5% drop. It's preliminary, and it's not everywhere, but in terms of nationwide populations. So we show the donors and the people involved with us that we're serious about this mission and we're going to be aggressive in carrying it out. That's a big motivator to stay involved.
It sure is. We'll touch on a little bit on the impact of COVID after the commercial break, and they're telling me I have to take it now so the sponsors can have their piece. So we're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Creating a comprehensive, effective marketing plan can be complex and difficult, but it doesn't have to be. At Lorraine Gregory Communications, we make it easy. Experience matters.
Hello, my name is Tom Hunt, the founder of Fame. Now, Fame loves the Ask a CEO podcast. We've actually been working with Greg and Peter behind the scenes for the past year, over a year, I think, to help build and grow the show. And so if you have a business, specifically a B2B business, and you're looking to raise awareness with people in your field, to build relationships with people in your industry, then we would love to talk. We have this almost completely done for you service, where we'll set up and grow a podcast that ideally will become profitable within the first 6 months to a year. So if that's something that interests you, you can just go to fame.so, check out our case studies, etc. We would love to talk. And of course, I do want to say thank you to Greg and Peter for building such an awesome podcast with Ask a CEO.
All right, and we're back with Robert Gebbia, the American Foundation for the Prevention of Suicide, CEO and President. So before the break, we just barely touched on the COVID impact in the world, in the suicide numbers. Now, my fear was that the first line medical professionals who were entrenched in the hospitals working ungodly hours in such close proximity to a serious illness, I thought that we were going to see a spike in PTSD type problems and potentially increase in suicide. Has that been realized, do you think?
There's certainly been instances of, and there was a very high profile, suicide of a physician here in New York, right in the early days of the pandemic. But we haven't seen a universal kind of jump. And even looking at data in other countries where they have better data collection systems, they get more real-time data. There hasn't been a spike in suicide yet, but we are concerned about the coming years because there's a few things we know. These things don't always show up immediately, right? It takes time. People become more depressed. They may have lost their jobs. They may have, all things, bad things that happen sometimes take time before people spiral and get to the point where they may be suicidal. On the other hand, we've seen more attention to getting help. The messages in our media and social media, traditional media, entertainment, everything has been geared to, if you're struggling right now, reach out and get help. If we invest in the prevention now, we might not see a spike in the years to come, but we are cautious about it. We're concerned about it. It's about investing now in the getting people the help they need.
I've been using a hashtag, was hashtag just one, because if we each devote ourselves to save just one person from suicide, we'll have a huge impact. So
Yes.
My tagline is just one. And
It's a great one.
Yeah, I got a couple of attaboys with it, and it was just, I don't know how I came up with it, whatever. It's part of it. Everybody has to have a piece in the problem to come up with the solution.
Absolutely. But we've never seen the dialogue about mental health so robust, and workplaces are now focused on it in ways they hadn't been. Schools have been focused on it in ways they haven't been. And I think families are too. People are realizing our mental health is part of our health condition. We all have mental health. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And what happens is that often people wouldn't seek help when they weren't feeling right. But that's changing, and I do think that we can keep those messages going after the pandemic is gone. We won't see a spike in the suicide rate.
I hope.
That's important.
I hope
we have to work to that.
Yeah, I hope you're absolutely correct that we do not see that spike that was troubling me during the pandemic. So you're a national organization, and we've discussed some of the ways that you seem to be having an impact, that the trend is flattening a bit, right? That we're watching for spikes and so forth and so on. So how do you use marketing and advertising to help advance your cause and to raise funds? Are you guys using marketing and advertising to do that?
Yeah, some. I mean, we don't do a lot of advertising per se, but we do a lot on social media. So, and that includes live programming, on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and getting influencers on social media. I'm always amazed at these individuals that have millions of followers. You say, how did they do that? But a lot of them care about mental health, and we've approached many of them, and they really get the message out. So it's this kind of spreading of the message of, hope, seeking help, check in on people you care about, what to do, drive them to our website for more information. So, we do a lot of that. We do some advertising on social media and also public relations.
Well,
I mean, we just did an analysis for our board, and since the first of the year, we were in 1,500 these are just print media stories. And so, between our national work with national media and our chapter work with their local media. So, radio, print media still work, but also social media. And we have about 1 million followers now on social media between our chapters and the national office. So those are the ways to stay in front of the public, right?
So one of the reasons for the Ask a CEO show is all about the CEO's personal branding and how it attaches to their organizations and their companies. So do you have a feel how your personal brand is tied to telling the story of the organization?
That's a great question. As I think about that, the most important thing is integrity. In terms of the brand, if you're and look at some nonprofits that have gotten into trouble, and it's over, you lose the trust, the public trust, and your brand is finished. And so integrity is really important. The other thing that I like to bring is collaboration. As big as we are, 39 million sounds great. This is a national public health problem that the resources are still, whether they're government funding or private funding, woefully low compared to the extent of the problem, right? There's over 1 million suicide attempts a year. So the other thing is to make sure that we show the value of our work, and I believe in that, and also that we focus on the integrity of the organization and getting the job done and not lose the trust. To me, that's probably the most important thing for a nonprofit. And I hope I bring that, but also collaboration, because we're small. We need partners, whether that's in the private sector or in the public sector. And we try to establish a lot of partnerships between companies, between government agencies, and other, institutions that I think really can take our work and expand it. And so partnerships, integrity, creating value, communicating that value are things that I really feel strong about in my own personal brand, and try to instill that in the organization.
Well,
so
it's
that
clear,
we don't become bureaucratic,
it's clear from our conversation that you're walking a line between passion and executive prowess. So they're very fortunate to have you. So Michael Dowling, who I love to death, of Northwell Health, says that culture eats strategy for lunch, meaning that the organization health and success, especially in the nonprofit world, would depend on the culture that exists, right? So how would you describe the culture within your organization, and why is it so important?
Boy, I couldn't agree more with Michael Dowling. We need strategies. We have strategic plans. We have to, carry those out. That's important. But, implementation is where a lot of plans go badly, and that's culture, and I think sometimes we're too driven. I know that. I kind of push that. I drive myself. I drive my team. They drive their team. But you know what? At the end of the day, I feel we owe that. And the culture is, again, about the public we serve. So things like passion, things like community. I mean, we do have value statements, and they point to 3 things: community, because we are a community of folks who've been touched by this. We bring our passion to the work, and impact. Impact is key, and so those are our values. And I do think that kind of permeates our culture. It's not for everybody, because it's very demanding work. Our team members work hard, whether they're raising money or delivering programs or doing advocacy. This is demanding work, but we owe it. We owe it to the people who have lost loved ones, who have come to us and say, I want to help. I don't want other families to experience this. Larry Sprung is a good example of that, his family, but we have tens of thousands of families like that. And that's kind of, I think, the culture. Culture is about getting the job done, taking care of our own mental health too, and that's important.
Yeah.
But it's getting that impact and keeping the passion strong.
I was going to say that your culture is almost more important because of the cause that you're operating in, because it's such emotionally draining to the people you're serving. It can't help but cross the gap between your service and their grief. So your culture, the culture you build in the organization is really important to me. I would be much more concerned about my individual employees' health so that they could
Yeah.
do their job and they're not being affected by their job and the
Yes.
cause that you guys represent. So, all right, so you're the head of the needle. So every day is a challenge, right? Every day you're working, you come in, how do you prepare to meet challenges on a day-to-day basis without getting burnt out?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, we do have to watch our own mental health and our own, so that we don't burn out. Two things about that, COVID probably is the best example of challenge nobody saw coming. And so what did we do? Well, we did like everybody else. We shut down our office. We all set up to work from home. We got the technology working. In short order, we were delivering our programs virtually. You got to know how to adjust. You can't do walks in person because you can't, be in big groups and you can't get a permit and whatnot. How do you continue to engage people? How do you continue to have them help you raise money? So pivoting becomes really important, and being flexible and nimble enough to deal with the things you haven't thought about. And COVID is only one example. There could be other things that happen. I think back to when Robin Williams died. What a shift that had. We didn't see that, coming, that all of a sudden, or Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, even more recent example, how all of a sudden the media interest in our subject just spiked. And there were media opportunities. It was a moment to get out good information, dispel myths. And so, we didn't plan for that. We didn't have enough comms, resources, but you pivot and you get it done. And I do think that that's how you deal with the unforeseen. You got to recognize it, say, what does this mean? How do we adjust? And then move forward and get it done. And I think that's a key thing. Flexibility and nimble. A lot of big charities, and I work for some of them, United Way, not to bash United Way, but they weren't able to adjust when the world was changing around them. And that hurt them. And they still struggle today in ways they didn't when I was there in the 90s. It was, they were premier. But I think a lot of organizations struggle because they're not nimble enough. They can't.
It's kind of difficult to get thrown almost like into the pot, if you will.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, your side of the street was pushed forward through tragedy. Important people in our world died. Robin Williams was like, "Are you kidding? He's the world's funny man. There's something wrong with this." And you go all the way back to to other important icons in the entertainment business who down that road, and that seems to push forward because then all of a sudden their followers seek you out and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we got to do something." It's almost like John Miller with the Guide Dog Foundation with Sully, the president's service dog, and the connection between the two at his death. It was just like all of a sudden Guide Dog Foundation was inundated. And they were not prepared to get thrown that curveball, but they had to adjust just like you guys did. And it's just sad that tragedy sometimes moves the ball. It's really kind of sad.
And certainly you don't want those tragedies. But what you do with the unforeseen like that really matters, and does it change you forever? Sometimes it did for us in terms of our investment then going forward in trying to do more in public messaging and media, how to help the media report accurately, things like that we got focused on because of those tragedies and those challenges. So I do think being open and flexible really matters when the unforeseen happens, And there's been real advances during COVID, back to COVID for a sec, because all of a sudden lawmakers and policymakers were saying, "Oh yeah, there's a problem with our mental health. We have to invest in that." And things that we wanted to have happen that didn't happen for years, telemental health and other things, all of a sudden were possible and are now happening.
Well, look, isn't the FCC developing the 988 number?
988 is a great example.
I can't wait for that to come on board. I wonder what's taking them so damn long, quite frankly.
It'll take until July of 2022, but that passed unanimously. Bipartisan support passed unanimously. nothing else passed unanimously in Congress.
I can't remember. So yeah.
But it does show you that's a
Can't
great
wait for that to
example.
happen. That's going to be a very, very important tool.
And we were a big advocate for that. We
Oh, I'm
used
sure.
our 35,000 volunteer advocates to push for that legislation.
I wrote articles. I wrote to the FCC. I have an article came out along on Business News. Exactly. You know, it's coming. It's coming. Wait on it. Please don't wait. In the meantime, do this, but it's coming. So, you know what?
That's great.
These are all important issues. They're very, very important to you, to your organization. So what does rest and relaxation look like to you?
It comes hard for me. I'm a workaholic.
Ah!
I drive myself.
A-type.
Be honest here, but I do like to exercise. Walking, power walking distances, does really help me relax. And spending time with my family. I realize too, it's not all work, and so being with my family when, we can all be together and enjoy something, that really rejuvenates me. And we all need that, right? So as I tell my employees, take time off, use your time, and you need a break. And I think I have to teach myself that all the time, but I keep it in mind. And it is family and exercise that help me.
I'm so glad that we can finally be back with our families again. It's just amazing. Because I mean, there were people I didn't see for a year. One of my grandchildren I didn't see for a whole year. That's like a lost year. But we're back. So I don't want to throw a wet blanket on the conversation. We're back. We're back. And so, Robert, before I let you go, the audience is made up of CEOs and those people on their journey to the corner office. And I always ask in closing the guests, what's the best advice you've ever received, either personal or business or both?
Well, that's a great question. I guess learning from people who sometimes didn't do it so well and sometimes did it really well. You learn from both good and bad examples, right? What not to do and what to do. But I think as a CEO, stay focused. Know what you want to get to, know what you want to accomplish, know what kind of impact you want to make, and then stay focused on it. It's so easy to get pulled in different ways and things that aren't important. But if you stay focused and you keep, sometimes strategize, re-strategize, and re-strategize again, how to get there, it isn't always a linear line, right? It's a jagged line. But I do think that for me is really work, saying, where do I want to see AFSP be in 5 years, in 10 years? What's the vision for it? What does it need to do? And there's some great information out there and things that I used. World Health Organization reports about what effective prevention looks like. We weren't there. And how do you get to those things that are the right things to do, and how to get there is really key. So stay focused.
Well, you almost said that in the beginning when we first started talking about when you took the helm, what you identified what you wanted to do. So there's the focus. Just with my team, we're always fidgeting with what's our plan look like? What's changed? Do we need to change the plan, or can we stick with what we've got? Because if you're not forward looking, you might as well just look in the rearview mirror and say, guess what? It was a nice ride and it's over.
Yeah, look at some great brands that have gone away.
Yeah,
and that's true in the nonprofit as well as for-profit world.
Yeah.
But and be true to your mission. That's really key. Don't get sidetracked with things that aren't going to take you, or advance the mission.
It's not a sprint; it's a marathon.
That's the other piece. Especially with some of those really ambitious goals in the beginning, it's, okay, we're going to broaden our base. We're going to get there. We're going to do all these things, but it may take a while. We can't do it in a year or even 2 years. Sometimes our advocacy work took 10 years to get to the point now where we're the leading advocacy group, both on Capitol Hill and in state capitals. We do state capitol days in every state, meeting with lawmakers. We did them virtually this year, all 50 states. But that took 10 years from the day we said, we want to engage in advocacy. We want to build out an advocacy arm for our organization. 10 years.
That is focus. That is focus. So, Robert, thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. You're welcome back anytime. But right now, the floor is yours. So let the audience know how they can get a hold of you and any
Sure.
information they want about the organization or how they can donate. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, the best thing is to go to our website. It's got great information, whatever you're looking for, how to help somebody, how to find help, to, how to become involved, how to become an advocate or make a contribution or attend a walk or whatever it may be you're interested in doing. And it's at afsp.org, afsp.org. So much information there. We really put a lot of effort into that website. I could be reached through that website too at rgebbia@afsp.org. That's my email. Being accessible as a CEO is an important thing. And so I like to make sure that I'm accessible to people. So rgebbia@afsp.org and afsp.org website, lots of good information about suicide and how to prevent it.
Robert, what is the current helpline for people?
Yeah, so there's the current line is the National Lifeline, and that's a government-funded service. It's not ours, but we really play a big part in promoting it. And that could be reached at 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255. And there's also a crisis text line. And a lot of people prefer text, especially young people. And if you, it's text to talk, TALK, to 741-741. 741-741 is the text line. And so those are great sources for people who want to, they're worried about somebody, they're struggling themselves. We encourage people to reach out. That information is also on our website, all over our website. So if you go to the website, you can find out how to reach out for help.
All right. So audience, please pay attention to those numbers. You may find yourself in a situation where you can help just one. So, well, that's a wrap. We don't want you to miss any opportunity for an upcoming Ask a CEO interview. We've got great guests lined up from every industry all over the world. The video interviews are available on YouTube at Greg's Corner Office or as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, or all the streaming services. And if you enjoyed the show, I ask you to please subscribe and share far and wide. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.